Thanks for joining us in the episode number 13 of IT Mythbuster series. For people who have joined just recently and wondering about what is IT Mythbuster, we pick out a topic that is of contention. A lot of people around the world from a hottest trend. And then we debate for and against in terms of whether it is a myth or it is busted. So who else can I get on board? My favorite host, Mike Fulton, is joining us. Thanks, Mike, for joining us, and I hope you're doing well.
Great to see you again, Suresh.
So today for episode 13, I have a topic which is of real interest to many of the people in IT. And I want to kind of take that to you. The topic is, can we run IT as a business? Now, a lot of companies around the world have had IT to be a more of a cost center. So when I bring this topic of running IT as a business, their eyebrows rise and they say, what are you talking about? So, but let's keep that in place and get your first feel around the topic of, can you run IT as a business? You have had a lot of experience over the years managing large teams. How do you think that this resonates with your philosophy and your work practices?
I love the idea of running IT as a business. I've seen organizations struggle to do that, but to me, it really adds a tremendous amount of value when you run IT as a business. And I think as we dig into the topic, I think there's going to be a whole bunch of different angles we're going to take to unpeel this onion. So I look forward to this topic today. I think it's going to be fun. And I will say it's not something that everybody does, but it is something that I've seen done successfully in some of the world's best organizations. So I'm excited to talk about it. Let's get to it.
Right. So let's get started off. So traditionally, we've been running IT to be a cost center, optimize the whole thing, manage resources, deliver projects and programs. So if you have to define running IT as a business, how do you define that whole thing? How does it look like when someone says we're running IT as a business? What's your definition of running IT as a business?
Well, I think it starts in changing the mindset, right? So when you think about a business, what does a business do? A business sells something to customers for more than it costs to produce that thing.
Right.
Right. At the end of the day, that's what running a business is all about, is identifying, creating a product that people want and then selling it to them. Right. And so for us, when we think about IT historically has been run as a cost center, right? And when you run something as a cost center, you're given a budget and your job is to do as much as you can within the context and the constraints of that budget.
Right.
Right. But when you think about IT in that way, right, what it really leads you to is a singular question that becomes the primary focus. And that is, how are we going to reduce all of our IT costs?
Right.
Right. But when you change the conversation, right, when you try to start thinking about running IT as a business, to me, the question isn't about how much does IT cost. The question becomes, what's the value equation?
Right.
How is IT providing value back to the business? Right. And cost is, of course, a dimension of value. Right. But it's the denominator, right? There's a number of things that go into the numerator in that value equation, right? And the way that I like to really simplify it, the numerator becomes better, faster, cheaper, and safer. Right. Right. Those four aspects are how we deliver value to our organizations. Right. And so if you can deliver things better and quantify that, and what you deliver is of more value to the organization than what it costs, then you're successfully running your organization as a business. Right.
Excellent.
In the cost center world, we don't necessarily think about the numerator. We don't necessarily think too much about better, faster, cheaper, or safer.
Right.
We simply think about cheaper.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest difference.
Right. And I think it resonates with the point of law of diminishing returns. A lot of times when you just cut costs over a period of time, it actually goes worse rather than just making it bad. So it's kind of making sure that you are careful enough on how much cost reduction is being kind of focused on. What do you focus? This expands. So you talked about 4 parameters. Let's talk a little bit about the 4 parameters on the numerator. Now, being more, how fast we can move. So we are trying to move to a world of agile DevOps, moving faster, which is more of velocity. We're also looking at safer, for example, security becoming a very important part, DevSecOps as a part of the whole value equation. So how do you prevent some of those unwanted outages? How do you ensure that the systems are up and running from a reliability perspective? But also, how much is your compliance with GDPR and data privacy and data loss? People are just kind of paranoid about this whole equation. We have distributed systems in the world, and we don't know how critical is the applications being managed and mitigated. So your security becomes a very integral part of risk and compliance. And that is just telling that I'm protecting my end-to-end value chain. So the whole part of moving faster, and then the next part is about optimizations in terms of bringing more operational efficiency, in terms of looking at automation, looking at self-healing options. So these parameters being focused on what I call as value levers, rather than just like talking about just the cost element of it. So in your opinion, do we have a framework or a best practice that for someone who wants to kind of experiment on running IT as a business, is there a reference architecture that you would recommend that people can?
Yeah, there is. It's a great question. And there are a number of different best practices, frameworks, and whatnot. But the one that I have used to the best effect over the years is really more of an architecture of best practices, and that's IT for IT.
Right.
IT for IT actually just recently came out with a new version 3, which has fundamentally changed how that reference architecture aligns with some of the leading thinking in the industry. The architecture now takes into account Agile and DevOps. The architecture now takes into account the latest and greatest around SRE and SAFe. The architecture also really focuses on the concept of running digital products,
right,
more than running projects like we have a little bit historically, right?
Right.
So it's very much a cutting edge, different way of thinking that's been embedded in that IT for IT version 3 framework. And because again, the idea of shifting from project to product,
right,
which is again a big part of that version 3, is actually really, really well aligned with this idea of running as a business.
Right.
One of the things I talk a lot about in the world of digital product management is the fact that the person in charge, the digital product manager, is a mini CEO.
Right.
Right. And so what we're really talking about is a world where our digital product is being managed as its own business.
Right.
Right. And so this entire architecture has been redesigned in version 3 around that concept. So it's really well aligned with this concept of running IT as a business. And it is really valuable to help any organization that's trying to undertake this journey and transform their thinking. So I definitely highly recommend it. I do want to come back, sure, and I'll let you jump in here, but I do want to come back and talk a little bit after you comment here, Suresh, about those value levers that you were talking about, because there is an important point I want to make on that. But let me let you get a word in on IT for IT here.
Yeah, so I like the way that you talked about IT for IT, because when I looked at IT for IT, and I've done it for CIOs, and every CIO, I believe, need to get the value from IT for IT, because I think for me, it creates a new identity in how the CIO world looks like in the face of the business. But having said that, also, one of the challenges that I see is we still have people in pockets that kind of figure it out. Oh, safe is being done, so let's do that part bigger. Then there's other people who look at business relationship management as a capability that you want to do it. So it becomes a little bit of a challenge when you're trying to put a reference architecture or overlying governance aspects to bring the moving parts. So is that easy and done? I'm just thinking a lot of times people think that, oh, it's easy in theory. In actual practice, it becomes very difficult to implement what IT for IT is saying. What is your take on that?
I think it's a great point. I think one of the things that's really a challenge in our industry, in the IT function within organizations, is that so many people actually kind of grow up in silos,
right,
within IT. There's a bias towards a silo. You become a cloud expert and you work on and you spend your career working in the cloud. You become a developer and your entire career is all about building new stuff. You become a project manager,
right,
or an architect, or an operations specialist. And your job as you progress through the organization is more about deepening your T,
yeah,
than it is about broadening your T. And
right,
so I've seen in organization after organization after organization, when you look at the highest ranking people in IT, they tend to have, more than most other functions that I've seen, they tend to have a very narrow and deep background,
right,
right? They don't have a broad background across IT. And that's why I think this IT for IT framework becomes so valuable. It is a framework that's been designed to cut across the entirety of the IT function.
right,
It's been designed to look at process flow, to create value streams for the IT function and how IT is supposed to work, to look at the information flow across the organization and really focus on providing some guidance around how to do that and do that well. What kinds of information is really needed? Where does it need to flow to and from throughout the organization? And I think that, to me, is one of the things that really truly makes IT for IT unique and sets it apart from a lot of the other frameworks. There are some really, really good frameworks out there. You mentioned several. BRM, I love the BRM framework. It's very deep and very valuable in the space of business relationship management.
right.
There's a lot going on in the area of DevSecOps. There's a lot going on in the area of observability. All these industry guidance, these best practices are helping us get deeper within these silos, but they're looking at it from typically a single perspective.
Right.
And the true value to me of IT for IT is that step back, that look at it from really a CIO's perspective of the entire IT function. You said it best, right? Every CIO should be able to get some unique and valuable insight from leveraging a framework like IT for IT in their organization, because IT for IT is that one framework that really looks at it from a CIO perspective.
Right.
And very few people in the organization do that.
I can agree that more. One of the things I love about IT for IT is that I've been now doing it with both product companies as well as service-based companies. So I think the realization is getting a lot more these days because they understand that let's talk the language of the business. How do we ensure that the metrics are more focused on business KPIs rather than just talking about IT metrics? And I think that there's a paradigm shift in the way that we have perceived things so long. And I always believe whatever has taken us so far will not take us beyond until we kind of radically change our thought process. So with all said,
and I think your point there, Suresh, takes us back to where we started the conversation, right? Which was better, faster, cheaper, safer. right? Those are higher order roll-ups of business metrics. Those aren't IT metrics. Those are business metrics. And it's really important as we go on this journey that we're translating the key KPIs of our organization up into those 4 business metrics so we can truly understand in a dollars and cents way the value we're giving back to the organization, right? It's, you talked about GDPR compliance, right? There is a dollars and cents valuation you can make on being compliant with GDPR. If you're not compliant, you will receive fines from the government. You'll lose business from your consumers when they find out that you're not compliant. There's a brand impact. You can measure all of that and translate that into dollars and cents and be able to take the cost of being GDPR compliant versus the impact of the risk reduction to your organization and weigh, are these things the right things for us to do? That's what running as a business is all about, is really focusing on those business metrics and turning everything back into the true end metric of a business, which is dollars and cents.
Excellent. So when that's setting in point, that I think, do you agree that running IT as business is the thing to do, and it is no longer a myth, and there are organizations already doing and seeing the value of it, and it's no-brainer for anybody to have a look at it and see how to adapt and adopt to the context in which they operate or run IT as a business?
Absolutely agree. I think running IT broadly as a business, I think running your digital products as their own business has a lot of value. And I agree completely. I think this is something that organizations can and are adopting all across the world.
Yeah. So this is Mythbuster. Remember that focus on the value levers that we talked about: faster, cheaper, safer, and also making sure that you focus on digital products, because today the customers are focusing on an encompassed opportunity rather than just looking at bits and pieces in projects. So our thought process will have to shift from a project mindset to a product mindset. Look at the holistic chain. Look at stepping up your game to get a seat at the table. A lot of times people struggle to get a seat at the table because you're trying to talk to the level of business. So your business acumen, the ability to think about those business prerogatives will make you make that leap shift. So thank you so much, Mike, for sharing that insights of how we can still run IT as a business.
Great stuff as always, Suresh.
So thank you everyone for watching this. We will get back to our next episode when we get to the next part, but I hope you're enjoying this IT Mythbuster series from Suresh GP and Michael Fulton. Thank you.